After my father's, his new wife took all the money and left me penniless, but then I discovered the real reason. My name's Ethan Cole. I'm 29, and until 2 weeks ago, my life in Boston was boring in the safest way possible. I woke up, went to work at the accounting firm, came home to my one-bedroom apartment, watched a game, slept. Everything shifted with a single phone call. It was Linda, my father's second wife. We weren't close. My father, Richard, remarried 5 years ago after divorcing my mum. Linda was younger than him by almost 20 years, and she had that smooth, polished look of someone who spent more time in spas than in kitchens. Her voice cracked on the phone. "Ethan, your dad passed away last night." I froze, staring at my half-empty coffee mug. The words didn't land right, like they were bouncing off a wall. Dad wasn't sick. He just texted me on Sunday about a new girl he bought. "I am sorry," I managed. "What happened?" "I think it was his heart," she said quickly, almost rehearsed. "Look, we need to discuss the will. Can you come to Providence tonight?" I left work early, ignoring the rain that soaked through my jacket on the walk to South Station. The train ride was a blur of grey buildings and fogged-up windows. Her house smelled like lavender and something faintly chemical. She handed me a manila envelope without even offering me a seat. "This is from the lawyer," she said, avoiding my eyes. "Your father left everything to me, the house, the savings, everything." I blinked. "Everything? That's impossible. Dad told me he set aside $150,000 for me in a trust." She crossed her arms. "He must have changed his mind. The will's legal. You can check with the attorney if you want, but it's final." Something in her tone that sharp, clipped edge made my skin crawl. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single-page will, typed, dated 2 weeks ago. No mention of my name anywhere. Why would he rewrite his will 2 weeks before he died? I asked. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "People change their minds, Ethan. You need to accept it." But I couldn't, because behind her on the sideboard, under the dim light of the dining room lamp, I spotted something in my father's handwriting on an unsealed envelope, marked with my name. And she noticed me looking. Her hand shot back, covering it. "Don't," she said. But it was too late. I'd already seen the date on it. September 12th, 2 days before he died. The air in Linda's dining room felt heavier than it should. I could hear the rain ticking against the windows like a metronome, keeping time on an uncomfortable silence. I took a step toward the sideboard. "Ethan," I said. "No." Linda's voice sharpened. "Then explain why my father would write me a letter 2 days before he died," I said. She didn't move. Finally, she sighed dramatically, opened the drawer, and slid the envelope toward me. "Fine, read it, but it won't change the will." The paper inside was folded twice, with my name scrawled on the top in Dad's blocky handwriting. I unfolded it. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means something's happened. I need you to know the account at Harbor Federal still exists. $152,400 is in your name. Don't trust everything Linda says, and don't sign anything until you speak to Charles. He'll explain. Love, Dad." I stared at the page so long my eyes blurred. "Who's Charles?" I asked. Linda's expression didn't flicker, but her fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass. "I have no idea. Probably some old friend of his." That was a lie. I could feel it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my mother. We don't talk often, but she must have heard. "Ethan, honey, I'm so sorry," she said. "Listen, did your father ever mention Charles Reed?" My pulse jumped. "Why?" "Because he's your godfather, and if Richard told you to speak to him, it means he didn't trust the people around him at the end." I glanced at Linda, who was pretending to scroll her phone but was clearly listening. The wine glass was now empty. The next morning, I drove to Mom's house in Quincy. She greeted me at the door in her robe, eyes puffy from crying. The kitchen smelled like coffee and buttered toast, the familiar, safe. She sat me down at the table. "I didn't want to tell you this before, but Richard called me last month. He said he thought Linda was moving money. He sounded scared." "Scared of her?" I asked. Mom nodded. "He said she'd been pressuring him to sign new documents, and when he refused, she started talking about selling the Providence house. Ethan, if the will changed there recently, you need to fight it." I thought about the Harbor Federal account. $152,400, a number etched into my brain now. I called Harbor Federal from Mom's landline. The banker confirmed the account existed, but when I asked to check the balance, his tone shifted. "Sir, that account was emptied yesterday morning." Yesterday morning. The day after Dad died. And the signature on the withdrawal. It wasn't my father's. I hung up the phone, my hand still gripping the receiver so hard the cord twisted. The banker's words replayed in my head. "It wasn't your father's signature." Mom leaned forward, worry carved into her face. "What did they say?" She took it, I said flatly. "Linda took every cent, yesterday." The kettle on the stove hissed faintly before shutting off, the silence that followed almost deafening. "You have to confront her," Mom said. "I will, but not alone." That afternoon, I drove back to Providence with someone in the passenger seat, Mark, my cousin on Dad's side. Mark was 33, a contractor built like he could carry a refrigerator up 3 flights without breaking a sweat. We hadn't spoken much over the years, but when he heard what happened, he volunteered immediately. "She won't play games with me there," he said, cracking his knuckles. We pulled up to the white Colonial on Brookline Avenue around 2:10 p.m. Linda's SUV was in the driveway. When she opened the door, her eyes darted from me to Mark. "What's this, some kind of ambush?" she asked. I stepped forward, holding a printed copy of the bank's confirmation. "You emptied Dad's Harbour Federal account, $152,400. Yesterday. The signature isn't his." She didn't blink. "That money was ours. He put it there for household expenses. I had every right." Mark's voice rumbled low. "Funny, because the bank says it was his name only, not yours." Her gaze shifted, just for a second to the tiniest crack in her confidence. Then she laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You're both wasting your time. Even if you take me to court, the will is clear. I own everything." I took out Dad's letter and placed it on the console table by the door. "He didn't trust you, Linda, and he told me to speak to Charles Reed. Do you want to tell me who he is, or should I find him myself?" Her jaw tightened. "Don't dig into this, Ethan. You won't like what you find." Mark and I left, but neither of us spoke until we were halfway down a minus 95. Finally, he said, "You know, I've heard of Charles. Uncle Richard mentioned him once, said he was the only one who knew the real reason he remarried so fast after your mom." That landed like a punch. "The real reason?" I asked. Mark nodded. "Yeah, and if that's true, it might explain why Linda's so desperate to keep him out of this." When I got home that night, I searched Charles Reed online. The first result was an address in Newport and a news headline from 3 years ago. "Local man testifies in federal case on corporate fraud." And the photo? Charles was shaking hands with my father. The dim glow of my laptop screen lit the crumped apartment as I reread the article about Charles Reed. A federal case, corporate fraud, and my father's name was tangled in it. Why had Dad never told me? I called Mark. "Get ready," I said. "We're heading to Newport tomorrow. Charles is our only lead." Next morning, the drive to Newport was heavy with silence. Mark's jaw clenched every time a car cut in front of us, his usual easygoing attitude replaced by tension. We arrived at a modest brick building on 10th Street around noon, Charles's listed office. Inside, an older man with stale grey hair and sharp eyes greeted us. "Ethan, Mark, your father mentioned you." Charles wasn't just an old friend, he was Dad's business partner in a side venture Dad never talked about. A startup involved in high-stakes investments, but more importantly, something Dad kept secret from Linda. Charles sighed deeply. "Your father was trying to protect you from Linda. She's not just your stepmom, she's part of a scheme to take everything." He slid a thick folder across the desk. "Here are the documents, signed contracts showing Linda's involvement in siphoning money from your father's accounts over the last year." I flipped through pages filled with numbers, transfers, and false invoices totaling close to $500,000. "And the will?" I asked. "That will she showed you, Fate?" Charles said, "Your real will was locked in a safe deposit box your father opened for you, but Linda knows about it and might be trying to get there first." On the drive back, my mind raced. How could Linda betray Dad so completely? I felt anger and sadness churn inside me. Mark broke the silence. "We need to act fast. If Linda gets to that box, all hope is lost." I agreed. That night, I received a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, Ethan, or you'll lose everything, including your family." My hands trembled. The threat was real. The cliffhanger. "Tomorrow, I'm heading to the bank to try and open the safe deposit box, but what if Linda's already there waiting?" The morning air felt colder than usual as Mark and I pulled into Harbour Federal. I checked my watch at 7:15 a.m. The bank opened at 8. Every minute felt like a lifetime. My phone buzzed again with the same unknown number. "Last warning, leave it alone." Mark looked at me, eyes dark with determination. "Let's move." Inside, the polished marble floor echoed our footsteps as we approached the front desk. "I'm here to open a safe deposit box," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The clerk asked for ID and the key. Dad had given me the key years ago, tucked inside a faded leather wallet. When I handed it over, the clerk hesitated. "We need authorization from the box owner or legal proof of death." I swallowed hard. "I have the death certificate and my father's letter." She nodded, then disappeared for what felt like forever. Meanwhile, Linda was on the other side of town, pacing in her pristine living room, phone glued to her ear. "I want everything transferred to me immediately," she hissed. Her lawyer's voice was calm but firm. "Ethan is stirring up trouble. We'll delay the release. Be patient." But patience was not on my side. Back at the bank, the clerk returned. "We can open the box, but someone else has to be present for legal reasons." Mark and I exchanged looks. This wasn't going to be easy. Suddenly, a familiar voice behind us. "You need some help?" Charles Reed stepped forward, calm but authoritative. He flashed a badge at not police, but legal counsel. With Charles's help, the bank relented. Inside the box was a thick envelope addressed to me in Dad's handwriting of the original will, plus documents revealing Linda's fraudulent activity. But as I grabbed the papers, a sharp sound echoed behind me. A phone dropped on the floor. Turning, I saw Linda standing in the doorway, eyes blazing. "You think this changes anything? You're all fools." Her voice trembled, but not with fear, with rage. Cliffhanger. Linda lunged toward the box, and Mark stepped in her way. The room froze, and then everything exploded into chaos. The chaos in the bank felt like a storm breaking loose. Linda's sudden lunge caught us all off guard. Mark grabbed her wrist, his grip firm but controlled. "Enough, Linda," he said, voice low but steady. She struggled for a second, then suddenly went limp, a flicker of something dark flashing in her eyes. Charles stepped in, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling security." Linda's glare burned into me. "You don't understand what you're meddling with. Your father owed more than you know. Debts. Favors. I'm protecting what's left." Her words sent a chill through me. "What debt?" I asked, heart pounding. She laughed bitterly. "Richard made promises he couldn't keep. That's why Charles is involved, and why you're about to lose everything." Back at my apartment later that night, Mark and I pored over the documents from the safe deposit box. Among the contracts and wills, I found something else, a set of emails between Dad and Charles, dated months before Dad's death. One message stood out. "Charles, I'm trapped. Linda knows too much. If anything happens to me, you must protect Ethan at all costs." That explained the letter and the will, but also raised new questions. "Mark, why didn't Dad tell me any of this?" "Maybe he was scared, or didn't want you to get hurt." The next day, Mom called. "I talked to a lawyer friend. We can fight this, but it'll get messy." I looked around my small apartment, feeling the weight of a family unraveling. And then my phone buzzed again, a text from Linda's number. "You'll regret crossing me. Watch your back." Cliffhanger. That night, someone rang my doorbell at 2 a.m. When I opened it, the shadowy figure whispered one word. "Run." The chill in the night air bit through my thin jacket as I stood frozen on the doorstep. The shadowy figure, barely visible under the dim street lamp, whispered again, "Run." Before I could ask who, a car sped by, tires screeching loudly. My heart slammed against my ribs. Without second thought, I grabbed my backpack and slipped out the side door, phone in hand, texting Mark. "Something's wrong, leaving now." We met in a rundown diner on the edge of the city, faces pale under flickering neon lights. "Who was that?" "Wakat." "No idea." Then my phone rang. The caller ID was Linda. I answered, voice steady. "Enough games, Linda." Her tone was cold and venomous. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, but this ends tonight." Before I could respond, she hung up. With Charles and Mom's lawyer, we planned a move to expose Linda. We gathered all the evidence, forged documents, bank fraud, threats. At 10 a.m., we arrived at the courthouse in Providence. Linda was there, looking as composed as ever, but her eyes betrayed fear. The judge reviewed the evidence and the verdict was swift. Linda's assets were frozen, and she was charged with multiple counts of fraud and intimidation. Later, in a quiet park near the courthouse, I sat with Mark and Mom. "It's over," Mom said, tears in her eyes. But Dad's betrayal, the secrets that still hurt. I looked at the empty bench beside me, the place where Dad used to sit. I never thought I'd say this, but maybe just this isn't about winning money, it's about finally knowing the truth. Mark nodded, and making sure no one else gets hurt. But as I walked away, my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "You got lucky this time, Ethan, but some debts never die."